What's up, everybody, and welcome to the iReach podcast. I'm your host, Paul Robinson, founder and CEO of ConstructReach, a national consultancy and initiative that aims to diversify the construction, design, and innovation industries and empower a younger generation. Every single week, we are here merging education, industry, and culture with a variety of featured guests that you do not want to miss. So let's go, iReach. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us once again for the iReach podcast, where we get a chance to talk about industry, education, culture, and everything in between. I've got a very special guest here. This man, we go back a long ways. Steve Makredes is here. I know him, but I'm going to let him tell his story, introduce himself. Steve, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you, ConstructReach, for really energizing this concept of the iReach podcast. I'm happy to be part of it and share my thoughts and have a conversation with you today, Paul. As Paul mentioned, my name is Steve Makredes. I lead the construction department at Target. I say by education and training, I'm a structural engineer. And prior to joining Target, I designed, high rises, bridges, schools, and a wide variety of other projects. But I've spent the last 30 years at Target, first designing stores and then migrating into the management of construction projects for stores, distribution centers, some of our corporate projects, as well as some international projects kind of around the world on behalf of Target. Like I said, I'm currently the vice president of construction, and my team is responsible for the kind of the execution of the company's major, any major capital investments for our support and the growth of our company. Currently live in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, with my wife.
It's cold.
It's cold. Yeah. My wife and it's cold. It's cold, especially if you're a 17 and a half year old puppy, which is my dog is 17 and a half year old. And she would wish we were a little bit warmer. And then I also have 3 kids that work in various parts around the country. So, that's a little bit about me.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us, Steve. Like I said, we go way back, man. So we're just going to talk, right? We get a chance to just let the audience sit on the wall, if you will. They can be a fly on the wall. We're having these conversations. We have these conversations all of the time, especially when it comes to addressing, some of the needs that are within the construction industry. When we look at the fact that, we don't have as much representation from a minority perspective as we should, and it doesn't represent the current working class. And you think about the retirement crisis that's looming over the industry right now, and the need for an influx, if you will, of young talent. But the key being this young talent is the most diverse that it has ever been. You and I, we have conversations about this all the time. And the way that you have championed, the need for more diversity, for more young people within the industry, the way you go about leading your team, and not just transactional leadership, because there's a difference, but being a true transformational leader. And I can speak to that first and foremost because, hey, I used to work under your team, right? And work on your team and under your leadership. And so I wouldn't be here just without the intentionality to how you go about leading in your role, how you continue to better yourself so that others can grow, that you have the opportunity to lead. And so it is huge, man. And so we're just going to dive into this a little bit, because when you think about the brand, right, Target doesn't necessarily have this brand that resonates construction. You don't think construction when you hear Target, but when you think about the sheer amount of physical locations that you guys have and your role, first and foremost, if you're not even familiar with all of the different career pathways that exist within the industry, you probably wouldn't even know that on the owner's side of things, there's construction opportunities. Right. And so when you think about our audience being young people and even on the educator side, that's something good for them to know, that on the owner side of things, on the brand side of things, you have construction career pathways that we want to bring visibility to and awareness to. And so thanks for sharing what your team gets a chance to do as you begin to execute those capital investments that Target has. But when we talk about kind of the current state of the industry and what you have the responsibility of overseeing and executing in various communities across the US, how does a national brand such as Target begin to impact individual communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you think about the impact that we do have. It's like first as a retailer, it's providing the service, right? The service of retail. It's also the jobs that we create for the people that work in our retail facilities. Yeah. But it's also the kind of the economic development that happens when our projects are being built. And very few of our projects are kind of like a standalone project. There's usually more economic development that happens around the stores that we built. And when that development's done right, you begin to create that sense of community. And the retail facility and the pieces it provides to communities can have a amplifying effect in development of adjacent construction, adjacent retail, and create, like I said, that sense of place where people want to belong and be part of that facility.
Yeah, no, that's very good. And that's something that people sometimes don't necessarily understand when you have, a brand that comes in and they're building or they're remodeling in a particular community. I mean, that has a residual effect on everything else in the community, right? There's other things that are attached to that. And so just being able to understand the presence that you guys have, the reach that you guys have, but also the intentionality with understanding maybe some of the economics in those particular communities. And then not only just building a store and retouching a store from a physical perspective, but looking at, okay, well, how do we begin to understand who's who? And then how do we begin to address maybe some of the ills and the longstanding area of opportunity that has been within the construction industry, and rethink how we approach retouching our stores or building in a community for the very first time, right? And so just thinking through that, like, talk to me a little bit about how you approach that, maybe, how you lead your team in, going through that acknowledgement where the construction industry has a long time been all about scope, schedule, and budget. But when you think about the need now, it's kind of identifying maybe that fourth pillar of scope, schedule, budget, and workforce development.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, when I think about how, Target, we want to go where our customers are existing and our future customers are. So we want to go where the people are, right? So that's, there are lots of places we're not that we need to go and become part of that. And when we do land on a place to be, our aspiration is to have our stores built by the community that's going to shop in them. There's nothing more prideful than being able to drive by something that you've built. And when you're building it in your community, that's a connection you begin to make to that facility. And we've seen that as we've grown to new markets and the importance of that. The U.S. construction industry doesn't represent our customer base. And so one of the things that when we were striving for our goal to have our stores built by the people that shop in them, it essentially would represent the U.S. population, right? Where, 50, 60% women, 13, 14% African-American, pick your demographic, it would represent that. Well, when we started looking at the data behind the industry, it's apparent that the construction industry, is at whatever, 9% women. It's at 6 or 7% African American. It's underrepresented to the country, and you wonder, well, why is that? And that was kind of some of the aha moments. Is like, well, it should represent the country's demographics. Why is that? We with ConstructReach and some other thought leaders kind of around the construction industry kind of tried to brainstorm around what are those challenges and what are some of the things you can look at to make a difference. And you hear it's construction's an industry you fail into. You don't want it's about getting dirty or if your family hasn't been it, you can't see it as something that you could see yourself as. And so, my background is, my father was in construction. I grew up around construction. It was, we were doing a project in our house around when I was a kindergartner, and I would come home from kindergarten and sit in the basement and watch people pound nails, and it was you could say it's kind of in my blood or my upbringing.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that, you don't know that the joy that comes from seeing a project become better every day, because every day there's progress. And so construction's got a little bit of a bad rap. And then it is an industry with structural racism that prevents these broader communities from coming in. It prevents women from feeling a sense of belonging. And so part of what we were trying to do is, how do you see yourself here if you can't see yourself here? And so with our work with ConstructReach, it's how do you make this virtual community come alive so that you can begin to see other people like you, because you're not alone, and see these as viable careers, not just a job, careers that people have successfully raised families and bought houses and changed lifestyles and built wealth. And how do you remove those barriers so that more people can see the importance of this industry and really what an exciting industry it actually is.
Yeah. No, that is well said. And I mean, there's so much in there, but I mean, that's why we work so hard with this initiative and within the company of ConstructReach and through our work with you guys, is because we can't just isolate having a career or a job within this industry as just that, right? Because it's such a well-paying career, if you will, and you spoke to that and you were very intentional, and I'm glad that you did that, of putting the emphasis on when you get an opportunity within this industry, it is a career, and these are high paying jobs that not only changes the life of that particular person who has the job, but now that begins to be a ripple effect, because, you begin to affect change within your family. And if we can replicate those opportunities, now you begin to change communities, right? And so that's where you really see the significance of this work. That's where you begin to see how it dovetails into a lot of economic progress that really has been ailing us for so long. And so to be a champion for this, to really lead with intentionality, for you in your role, to be, a change agent, right? Not just saying what is good in the moment, but actually putting in that work to say, okay, well, how do we begin to really drive change? And how do we begin to really, put forth practical activities and initiatives in place that have results to them, right? And so that is definitely something that I want to make sure that, that I am truly appreciative of, just being able to see the commitment and the work that has been taking place thus far. And you hit on something else that is really important too. This is not an industry that you fail into. And being able to bridge that gap between industry and education, because on the education side, you're beginning to see those changes with the introduction and the more widespread programming of CTE programs, different career pathways, because a lot of times, right, for so long on the education side, and it's not to put a 4-year degree in a negative light, but when you are in K through 12 and the next successful step is pretty much only going to a 4-year degree or to a 4-year college to get a degree, then every other decision that a young person makes as they are becoming budding adults is almost as if they failed into it. And a lot of times that's where construction has been presented. And so you have educators who are beginning to look at this differently now and saying, you know what, we can celebrate a certification just like we do a degree. And how do we begin to showcase that these opportunities that are within this construction industry are viable opportunities that they should be proud of. So how do we begin to make sure that they understand the opportunities that exist, the bright future that they can have within this industry, to allow them to have accessibility into the industry and visibility so that we can really create that change? And the amount of thought, the amount of time and dedication that has gone into this thus far, and the commitment right into the future is definitely something that I think, I want to make sure we make mention of that, because you're doing an excellent job, right? And the company is doing a good job in doing that. So yes.
Well, I want to acknowledge you, Paul. We've had conversations on multiple occasions, and I have the privilege to consider you friend and mentor on this. But I recall a conversation we were having around. I don't even remember the specifics, but the result was your comment to me is, how much are you willing to? It's great that you're concerned and you care, but how much are you personally willing to risk in order to drive change? And I think that was a fantastic statement of like, okay, you need to have actions that back up your words, because your words, there's enough words, time for words have really passed. It's what are the actions you're going to do? Educate yourself and turn your action, your knowledge into actions. I wish everyone had someone they work closely with that could spur them on in a way like that you have spurred me on to continue to be better and take action.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, absolutely, man. I mean, when you think about kind of where we are within this industry and just the climate of everything, when you think about, equity or what have you, it's hard work to do, right? And you have to really be committed to be part of change, because I always say there's two things. It's easy to talk about change, but then, change is difficult, right? Change is difficult for a variety of reasons. We can talk about change all day until it's time to change, right? And that's where things get a little bit more complex. Things get a little bit more dicey, right? Or people begin to go back on what they said. And, for you, because I didn't even know that it stuck that much, right? But that's something that is true, because anything worth having is worth fighting for. And it is a struggle. And so many people before us and alongside of us have been in this struggle and in this fight for so long. And so, of course, one person can't change everything, but we can do our part, right? And if we really want to see change, that does come with a certain level of risk. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to be aware of that, because then it lets us know before we even start how far we'll go, right? When there's adversity. And when you know that beforehand, to say, you know what, this is what I'm willing to put on the line because it's worth it. Now, you know how far you can go, and before we got into this, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And anybody that's beginning to do this type of work and want to actually see change, it takes that level of awareness to know that there's some risk involved. And so, thanks for sharing that.
I had a chance recently to listen to Heather McGee, who's an author and attorney, and recently published book, The Sum of Us, SUM, SUM, really what racism costs everyone, and how we can prosper together. And really, it's not this, it's back to the premise. This is not a zero-sum game. It's not someone else benefits at the expense of someone else. And I think that's what, your comments before it, and then her comments on the book really helped, formulate and be able to express this it is about economic opportunity for everyone. And this is not like someone else doesn't get a job because someone gets one. There is enough work and enough opportunity and enough wasted economic growth that can fuel kind of all of us. And so I think that's, my good friend Tom Harmon, I'll quote him, you do it's the smart thing, not because it's the right thing, because there's huge business opportunities to do this, or it's the smart thing. And by the way, and it is the right thing. And the all the economic data that tells you that we need to put energy towards this because it's the smart thing for us to do.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah, well said. Oh my gosh. So, as we look at, where we are today, and when you think about kind of how COVID has just really reoriented society on so many different levels, and it's impacted us in a variety of different ways. When you think about kind of having an impact in the communities, and one of the things that has, when you think about the digital age that we are in, and when you think about the impact of COVID, I always say, one of the biggest things that has been impacted with COVID is that human interaction, right? And the sense of community. And when you think about Target and being very community oriented, and understanding that, there's just some things that you just can't replace, right? That interaction. And because we're built for community. Everybody has something, nobody has everything, which keeps us in constant need of one another, right? And so when you think about that, like, what's next for you to maintain that sense of community, for you to continue to build in a way that allows for it to not just be a singular event, but to galvanize communities, for somebody to have a sense of empowerment and purpose. Talk to me a little bit about what's next, if anything has changed, right? Because of kind of the climate of things.
Yeah. I think, COVID has, and I think continues to create a lot of uncertainty. And I think what we've tried to do through the pandemic is provide that clarity, without that certainty, and that means you're sharing your needs and your intentions with people in a way that is much more open than it's been in the past. And it also means you have to spend more time listening, listening to your team, and then once you do that listening, it's adjusting plans that you think you already knew, and those expectations around that, so that it's just it's required you to do that. And, I think, we're here on Zoom, and there's other, media platforms, but in the past it would have been, a phone call or a personal meeting. And, the fact that we can see each other, and teleconferencing was all those were there, but yeah. Zoom probably accelerated us, and the pandemic celebrated our connection this way, 20 years into the future. Right. And so what I found is it's easier for me to connect with people that in a way than they maybe would have had to fly to see me or come up to see me. And so I've made deliberate, had to take time to say, I know this is a gap that we can't get together. So I need to be able to reach out to people and make the connections and spend the time on one-on-one. And I found I've been able to connect with more people than I would have had I been in the office. I also found that those chance interactions don't happen, right? So I've also had to be deliberate of, I'll see someone on a webinar or something, and I'll write down their name, I'll reach out to them in LinkedIn, and I won't hunt them down, but I will try to make a connection with them. Say, hey, I was really, what you said there I was interested. I was curious about what you had to say. Can we meet? And pre-pandemic, I probably wouldn't have put the energy into that, and that person probably wouldn't have reached back to me. But now it's like it's a low barrier to entry. You click on your calendar, and boom, there you are, face to face with somebody, and that's been something that has been to me a plus out of that. But you have to be deliberate about it. You have to want to do that, and you have to invest the time to do that. And I think you have to be deliberate about seeking those broader group of stakeholders, or you will just get very narrow in your focus. And you have to realize that the introvert extrovert. Some people need more time to express, and so leaving pauses on a screen and quiet time to have people speak are things that I've had to adjust personally to make sure I'm not doing all the talking and doing more time listening.
Well, I mean, just like always, we get a chance to talk about so many things and important things, right? Not just, hey, how's the weather, but to really get beneath the surface and talk about life, how it's impacting us, how we're doing, in the climate of things. And so this was just another conversation, to just to kind of add to the many that we've had. It's been super, super beneficial and helpful. And just a positive in my life for the relationship that we've had, the work that we get a chance to do together that comes through genuine relationship, right? I think a lot of times, we call ourselves community, and community is different. We're close from a proximity standpoint, but a lot of times we're still devoid of relationships. And that's why we can't get things done. And what I do appreciate is that we were not just close from a proximity standpoint, because I did spend some time in Minneapolis, right, working on your team. But now just being here, we're states and miles away. But, through video conferencing and through Zoom, we still get a chance, right, to really expound on and be, in community, because the relationship is there, and then getting a chance to affect change in a very positive way. And so just want to say thanks for joining the iReach podcast today. Hope that you've had a good time on the show. Of course, I got to bring you back. But yeah, just been a super blast, just getting a chance to talk, chop it up as we always do. So thank you, Steve.
Well, thank you, Paul. And I just want to close it. I am really optimistic about the future. And it's, particularly when I would attend one of the I Built This events that you guys have created and put on. I see the energy of youth. I see the care that all the people in this construction industry have for their communities around them. I've spent almost my entire life surrounded around the beauty of kind of building things and creating these senses of places. I always enjoy solving problems with people and bringing people together in order to do that. And I think there's so much more to do in this industry. There's, to accomplish with innovation, with technology, prefabrication. I mean, the construction industry needs the broad set of minds that are out there, and we cannot exclude any group from that. And we need to include it because, to see what, your work physically change the environment around you. I don't know of another career that lets that happen. And I would encourage anyone that has any questions, reach out, get engaged with ConstructReach. It's a great social platform for you to meet other like-minded people to learn more about this industry, because I am energized for the future, and the built environment is really not going away, and is a great career for anyone to be part of. So thank you, Paul, for your leadership, and look forward to continued years of kind of creating the future.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. All right. Well, that is a wrap for us today. Once again, I want to say thank you to Steve Makredes for joining us on the iReach podcast. Continue to follow us, like us, subscribe to this podcast. Follow us on all social media platforms at ConstructReach. That is one word. And engage with us. Let us know your thoughts about this episode. Let us know some topics that you want to hear about, or what we touched on that you want to hear more of. All right. Thank you, guys. Take care. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning into our show. Remember, like, share, subscribe to the podcast, and join the movement as we reach to build a better future that we can all be proud of.